Good afternoon, everybody. Just a few guidelines. As this is a recorded talk, the audio function will be limited to just myself's audio as the moderator and the speakers to help us listen better. Before we begin, just acknowledging our education partners, the Ateneo Art Gallery, Museum Foundation of the Philippines, and the Embassy of Spain in the Philippines. Good afternoon, I'm Tricky Lopa again, just to thank our co-presenters, Globe Platinum, and our exhibition partner, Daata. This afternoon, this conversation will take us literally out of this world. It's a conversation between Jira Duguid and Jeremy Couillard. Educated as a painter, Jeremy Couillard is a self-taught new media artist who has made numerous well-received and internationally exhibited video, virtual reality, and video game works accompanied by installations, paintings, and ephemera. His works often deploy humorous narratives about future dystopias to explore what motivates us as humans to work, live, and create. Art Fair Philippines is also featuring 4 of Jeremy's works at our film section live at the amphitheater of Ayala Triangle Gardens. These include his new film, There Is No Up or Down, Only Attraction, and 3 works from his Fuzz Spiral series, a collection of films based on the artist's recent video game Fuzz Dungeon. Jira Duguid is a professional non-tent creator and self-taught new media artist working with game engines in order to commodify dreams, nightmares, memories for mass distribution online. So without much ado, let's listen to Jira and Jeremy.
Okay, hello everyone, I am Jira, and this is my friend Jeremy Couillard. And we are going to just, we are now in Jeremy's game project for this this new release of his called Escape from Lavender City, right?
Yeah, Lavender City Island.
Escape from Lavender City Island, and we're gonna I also brought some of my own game assets, and we're all gonna combine them and build something together while talking about basically working with game engines and a bunch of other topics, right?
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, and you're an artist, you're a game designer. Yeah, do you want to so
Yeah,
people
sure.
know
Thank you. So yeah, I am an artist. I work with game engines, and I'm also in a label / collective called Fantasia Malware, which is 3 of us kind of doing games as performances and stuff. Actually, the assets I brought are from a previous release we did called The Life of Saint Fiona, Bianca Rosina. And yeah, I'm just a big old nerd. How about you?
Cool. Yeah, and also you have a really cool podcast.
Yes. Yeah, I have a
um,
podcast called New Genesis Online, which is just about tranny shit and video games and stuff like that.
Cool. And yep, I'm an artist, game designer as well. And I guess Jira and I originally met on a Discord server with a bunch of other weirdo artists, game designers called Orcadia. And we've been friends on there for the past, 2 years or something, right? Since the pandemic started.
2 years, my God. Yeah, actually, yeah. I never thought about the timing of Corona, actually. Yeah, it's odd that we started at that point.
I know. Yeah, that's what kind of brought that whole community together, which is kind of interesting.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, let's jump in here.
Let's jump in. Okay. I guess you can begin building while I will ask my first question.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so basically, before we begin, I would just say we previously did a conversation that is on my blog. It's organic-plastics.net, and I feel like this is kind of a continuation of things we were talking about last time. So if you want like the full like expanded universe version of this, then maybe check that out first. But anyway,
Yeah, we'll put a link somewhere.
yeah,
I
I'll
don't
just
know.
like put it on screen like now.
Oh, you want to do it? Yeah. You want to do it now?
No, I mean like in post.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So here's my first question.
Sure.
Okay, so two topics we talked about last time was how games and art need each other, to quote you, and how the material reality of the art world has created an environment of artists as managers. Artists, like, there is like kind of this broader trend of like artists without the practical knowledge or literacy of technologies they work with, like often having like a team of people who kind of build work for them. Um, and, you know, value judgments aside, it's just like, what do you think, like, due to this, like certain tropes emerge when we see art that is somehow game adjacent? And I was wondering what kind of aspects of game engines do you think are overlooked or underappreciated in an artistic sense due to um, often projects that work with game engines, the artists themselves isn't actually working uh, or like literate in game engines at all, and it's kind of like
Right.
more of an outsider perspective. So I was wondering, like, um, are there things that you're curious about with game engines that you think are overlooked or something like this?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. It's something I was thinking about too lately, just because how my last game, Fuzz Dungeon, it got like nominated for these awards in
Right.
like a more industry kind of arena, which like kind of blew my mind that people liked it so much. And I think I was thinking about like maybe why people were into it. And I think one of the reasons is, like you said, it was just me who made it. And I'm someone like engaging with the media like all on my own, and I don't have a team of people helping me. So I guess it just was able to be more weird and like less stylized. And I feel like when people start making games in big teams, they tend to like just mimic a corporate work environment.
Right.
Maybe you can build a little bit. Well, I think a little.
Oh,
See what you could.
sure. Yeah, sure.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Um, like there's this. I have no interest in ever having these types of jobs, but like from how I'm familiar with it, there's stuff like a Scrum board and like these kind of like post-it notes on a board, and everybody has a duty, and they're all adhering to whatever an art director says, and the art director is going off what the director says. And so you get this real like corporate kind of like capitalist top-down way of making things, which is like lame. Like I don't want the world to be like that, and I definitely don't want to make art like that.
Yeah,
I
I think with
go on.
software especially, like that's really the only model that exists, and like
Right.
and I think this is something we talked about with my previous collective, like AAA, is like like any kind of steps we do not in that direction, it's like we don't know how much we've internalized of that. Like I feel like even if you try and think of outside that method, it's like we're still so like it's like it's since it's the only example, it's like
Yeah.
it's so hard to kind of go beyond that. Like,
Yeah. And I think a lot of what I like about art is you can imagine different realities, right? And like, late capitalism or whatever, or this, like, just to even be more granular, like this working method is so new. It's like, what, 30 years old, maybe tops.
yeah,
But we treat it like it's the only way to do things. And I guess it's just really, it's not human. It's like turning humans into machines, and it's really like alienating, and it just seems like an awful way to work. And then also it doesn't capture what it's like to be human. Like when you make a work of art in such a corporate top-down way, it just often will like um what am I looking for? My stupid phone is ringing. it like when you make a work of art like that, it ends up looking so stylized, you know? So like so many video games are
What do you mean by stylized?
like it has the same style, you know?
Like
And it
there is
like
a style that is kind of universal, or like
yeah, like yeah, like throughout the game, it just looks the same, you know? So like there's never
okay,
many and I'm thinking about like a lot of indie games.
right,
I
yeah.
call out of like some, you know, like Greece or something, or like even I know I hate on Disco Elysium a lot, but like it kind of does. I
I
know people really love it,
I didn't know
but I
you hated
really,
that game. I knew you hated
I,
Kentucky Route Zero.
oh yeah, I didn't like that either. I really
Interesting.
am hating on these
So why
games
don't you like
I
Disco
really like,
Elysium?
but because it's so stylized. But well, also because of all the text. Ultimately, that's a whole different conversation. But
And
it like it has a style, this kind of like watercolory style, and it sticks to it the whole time, which was just kind of boring. Like I was never visually like that blown away. Besides at the very beginning, I was like, oh, this is really pretty,
yeah.
and but it stayed the same the whole time, you know. And it's like a
Yeah.
brand, you know,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
this idea of
it's like you can see like the design Bible that they've kind of put
yeah,
across the
right,
table.
right, yeah, like a style, that idea of a style guide, right?
Right.
And I think like art and design really can butt heads a lot of times, you know. Like because design has a purpose and art doesn't really. So like
But
it's
so
kind of
many
tricky.
artists are brands though. Like,
Right, I know, yeah. I mean, what do you think about that? Like, yeah, I don't know.
well,
Is that a positive thing or a negative, or I don't
I mean,
know.
I think it's a negative. I mean, it's something I've talked about a lot before, is that like my job is often working for artists. And
Yeah.
I think it is very much like I don't really see how it's any different to working for a design studio. Like it's just a different like it's just a different audience really. Like the mentalities are very similar.
Right,
Um
right.
and like yeah, it's like you know, and it's like a video, you know, like working with these mediums, it's like the difference is just selling to a bunch of kind of like angry gamers or like oil barons or weapon dealers. I don't know, like it's like kind of like the
Right.
two different markets there are.
Right. Yeah, and I think originally your original question, we were talking about like art and video games kind of needing each other. And to go back to that a little bit, I think that's something that art can offer to video games, right? Is to just to make them more weird, and less brandy, you know, and like less designed and more like spontaneous and stuff. I think that's something the best kind of art offers. Of course, like a lot of artists don't work like that anymore, but I think a lot do work in interesting ways still, of course. And like, you know, ultimately what art is just you're making analogies to things to like generate ideas, you know. Yeah.
Maybe that's like another thing I like about game engines too is like I feel like a lot of the art I see like made with technology, and especially kind of people who kind of like have a team or whatever, is they have to work at like the forefront of technology and kind of like be these kind of like technical innovators in some, they'd be the first person to use a certain whatever. And it's like I think
Mhm.
something I like about game engines is it's kind of like especially when you're kind of at like Alps, you know, like working with game engines like we're using, it's much more of like a folk a folk tool or something, like a like, you know, like it's like the technical complexity is like, you know, you know, like it's like we're using tools that are much more accessible, and it's like it's kind of like what you kind of using a much more ubiquitous medium that isn't like you know, like the games we make are like 10 to 20 years behind the cutting edge.
Right. Oh, so do you mean like it kind of makes us outsider artists automatically or something?
No, not outside artists. I guess there's something about like being like obsolete in some kind of like technical arms race I like.
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, like we don't feel like obligated to work on the cutting edge.
Yeah, and there's something kind of like um Well, I guess Unreal's a funny example because it's like it's this thing that's like designed for like, showing like the pores on someone's skin and like this like hyper realistic like,
Mhm.
like everything is like simulated and whatever. And then it's like using that to like kind of and then bringing down the fidelity to like the kind of what a single person can do instead of like a massive team. But you're
Right,
using the
right.
same technology as a team that is like, like this is the same tool that people make the Mandalorian in or whatever. And
Right,
like,
right, right. Yeah. It's like we have this tool that's like $1 billion industry
yeah,
uses. It's like their main thing. But we're just like broke sitting in our like little shitty apartments with the
yeah,
same tools, which is pretty wild. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Sh-
So
Should
I'm trying
I
to find
should I get to the next question?
yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, previously you mentioned this idea of collective consciousness, how the cartoon characters, mythologies, and metaphors we grew up with are just as imaginary as our individual egos. You then went on to wonder if the cultural homogenization we've experienced under capitalism has impacted this consciousness, how the collective imagination appears unable to imagine anything new, how it appears stuck and trapped. So now I'm thinking about how AAA video games and AAA video games is like the kind of like the Hollywood of video games, like the big budget, like top end, big releases. It's actually what most it's for most people. It's actually synonymous with video games. Like they don't know of any other type of video game. Um,
Right.
so I'm thinking about how AAA video games has homogenized over the last decade or like decade plus to kind of like a singular promise for an audience. And like obviously there's like there are a few genres, but I think one that is extremely pervasive um, is this idea of like rolling green fields of grass and a blue sky, vaguely vaguely English accents and and the promise of like an open world. Like
Right.
this idea of an open world. Um, to explore. And some examples of these games, like over the last uh, 15 years or less, is Skyrim, the endless Assassin's Creed games, Zelda Breath of the Wild, basically every Japanese RPG, Death Stranding, Grand Theft Auto series, Halo Infinite, Red Dead Redemption, and now, as the time of recording, this new sensation, Elden Ring.
Mhm.
Um, so practically speaking, uh, this promise, like in terms of like the reality of what the game is, manifests as basically like a 3D array of checkboxes to tick, like a world that can be completed and is ultimately incredibly linear. The illusion of choice is present, but ultimately every possibility branch of the player is considered and accounted for. Um, and yeah, I just wanted to know like what you think of uh like sandbox as like a as this kind of like phenomenon basically. It's kind of like it's like something that people kind of come back to again and again as this like promise of an open world. And I was wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with saying like what everything you just described, how like these games are so homogenous, these open world games with a map, and you just go and you complete your mission, and it's like everything is really set in place, what you can do, and they're all the same pretty much. And I'll just start by saying like they're really fun still. like like these games are when you talk about it and when we think about it, what we're actually doing, it's like really boring and like, Jesus, why am I spending all my time doing this? But here, do you want to build a little
Yeah,
bit?
I can build.
Change that floor. It's like a little nasty, but um, so like they're fun. They're really addicting. And I think like in that book, Expanded Cinema by Gene Youngblood, I think he wrote it. When did he write it? Oh, that's cool. I think it was written in like the late 60s or something. And it was mostly about like experimental animation and video at the time and like how technology can be used to create new kinds of art. But he was kind of warning back then even about these like triggers that directors and people using technology could place in there to like trigger our emotions really easily, and like kind of manipulate us to move through the artwork and kind of like get sucked into it really easily. And I think like we've really mastered these kind of like triggers in entertainment, right? Where like we can like really, we like designers, video game designers really know how to trap people into these worlds, right? And get you really addicted to it, by using these same like tropes over and over again that feel really like familiar and comfortable, and like cathartic, you know, like, yeah. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say like that reminds me of like something I think is like kind of that has changed a lot in games, is I feel like as you say, is like kind of like every like the kind of the experience that a player goes through is like so designed now. And like I think something that's kind of interesting in comparison to like older games is like I feel like older games are actually fundamentally unfun to play. They're kind of like a slog, but they're like but still people really responded to them at the time, and they're very like precious to people as memories. And I think it kind of shows that like you know like games like there's this idea now with games that there's like kind of like gameplay design, and then there's like kind of like the aesthetic presentation on top, and like you can change the setting. You know, it could be science fiction or fantasy or whatever, but this kind of like gameplay is like always kind of very similar. And I think with these older games that there's things were like not as separated. I never kind of like my relationship to older games was more like as a world to visit. I wasn't thinking of them like I wasn't thinking if they're fun or not, because they're actually incredibly unfun.
Right.
And I think that's something that's kind of changed with modern video games, is like they're like really aware of like those dopamine triggers and like like you know these like feedback loops.
Right. Yeah, and I think that makes it a really interesting space to work in, right? Because like they're so good at being fun and like almost in a sense, like in a Gene Youngblood sense or whatever, they're really good at like manipulating us. So I think it's still important to make like games that aren't that fun, maybe. I don't know. You know, like, or just like create worlds that just offer alternatives to that. You know, I think like it's funny, Fuzz Dungeon, like I don't think a lot of people play it. You know, I personally think it's like kind of fun, but I think, you know, a lot of people just appreciate that it exists conceptually, that that world exists and this
Right.
weird, you know, which is like a weird thing. But then also like, I think maybe I talked about this in our last interview, but I like this idea, this theorist Wendy Chun has about like loitering in digital spaces. Like I like that idea of that. I just feel like in Steam and all these marketplaces where you can buy games, I like this idea that I feel like my games are just like loitering in that space, just kind of like being annoying, like a teen at the mall, like in the way that like a teen at the mall is just kind of like this annoying byproduct of like suburban like hell or whatever. It's like
Right.
that's what my games are, like teens at the mall or something.
Kind of like you know there's like this like term like shovelware or whatever, that like you know the kind of games designed for the bins outside the store.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that. Just to like have something like some alternative, right? Because like going back to what you're talking about being stuck or whatever, you know, it, and then in the Mark Fisher kind of sense, like it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. Or he didn't even make that up, did he? Did he just, I don't know. But anyway.
I think that Zizek or whatever. I think he said that.
Yeah, okay. Well, whoever said it, it's like definitely a vibe, right? It's definitely like a
It's a
moment
vibe.
that it feels like we're in, right? Like it's a lot easier for us to literally imagine the whole world ending from like global warming or like at this point war or whatever than it is to find some sort of alternative to capitalism.
Yeah.
Uh, so like I'm not trying to like say that art is that solution at all. It's just like art is just, you know, we're making analogies to things. It's just like a feeling that we have where it feels good to try to imagine something different, you know. Yeah, and I'm not, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I had something to say about that. Oh yeah, another thing I think is interesting is this idea of like something I'm always kind of up against when I show my stuff is it's like, it's like people will say stuff like, oh, well, we don't just have like, and this is kind of being a more inside of like the kind of alternative game spaces as opposed to like an art world context. But it's like people are like, oh yeah, but we don't just have like fun games, we have like arty games. And there's this idea that like art games are synonymous with like something that's like extremely not fun. Like the idea that art cannot be fun.
That'd be fun,
Because
right?
it's like I never make anything with the intention of it being like fucking miserable to play.
Oh
Do,
no,
do you
same,
know what I
same.
mean? And like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like that's how it's often read, or like which I find interesting. Um,
right. Yeah, and I don't mean it's not fun. It's just, I mean, I guess more so that there's no way we can compete with like Square Enix or something, or like Activision, in terms of like how fun we can make our things, you know? Like I definitely think your games are fun, and like everybody, you know, all our friends and stuff doing similar stuff. Like I enjoy playing those games for sure. But they definitely can't compete, right, with like Assassin's Creed or Grand Theft Auto or something, I guess, you know.
yeah, I guess there's like many types of fun, and like
Yeah, right, right, exactly. Like I like a Thomas Pynchon novel. That's not easy to read, you know, but it's still like pretty fun.
mhm.
Versus like, you know, a Stephen King novel or something that's fun and reads really easily. But both are cool, I guess, you know. I don't know.
um, I'll show you where my stuff is. We can put some of my things
Yes,
in.
please. Yes, please do. Let me
Um,
just, and well, we'll do it later. Okay.
oh, you're
Yeah.
doing no, you go.
No, no, no. Do your thing.
Okay. So I have some, here's some things I prepared earlier. Um, so these are, let's go with the Mata. So the thing about these is,
Or 2D.
yeah, but they're billboarded, so it should be
Oh,
good.
cool.
I have to hit play, and yeah, and
Oh,
now,
oh, yeah. Well, that's cool. Everything will. Oh, nice. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
um,
Nice. That fits.
yeah, I'll get a good pose.
Is that a self-portrait?
I mean, she's definitely supposed to be visibly trans. I wouldn't really say it's a self-portrait.
Yeah.
It's actually, and it's based on a real person. Actually, it was based on
Probably.
this woman, and like there's like this like trans DIY um like DIY HRT space in Berlin, which like really saved me. And like there's a woman there, and it's like based on her, like
Okay.
her visual appearance is. Yeah. Anyway, I have like a lot of these. Like I have. We can also put like a drone in here.
Cool.
Stop. Oh, it doesn't stay. Okay, 1 second. Okay, I'll do this and I'll ask you the next question. Uh,
Cool. I didn't realize that these were billboarded. That's really cool.
yeah, I love working with billboarded stuff. I think
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, it's so efficient.
and like
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of like it's like kind of you also like kind of the visual possibilities. So like you like working with rendering and like video and stuff that's like outside of the game engine as well.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so now we
Yeah,
have
it's funny. It's funny, like when building out these worlds, how much we have to think about efficiency and like working with other tools, like making all the tools like jive together. Oh, there you go. Yeah. We should have been in full F11 the whole time. Nice. Look at that guy.
Cool. Okay. I'll let you take over and I will read the next question.
Alrighty.
Um, Okay, so this is like the final question. So finally, you and I, wait, I'm off screen. Hold on. Can I have the mouse for a second?
Yep.
I just realized that the recording. Okay. Okay, you can take it again. Okay, so finally, you and I are doing a show together in July. I'm gonna put some text on screen. If you want to subscribe to this mailing list, there'll be more info about the event that you will be at and I will be at. We are each going to be presenting a game we've been working on. Escape from Lavender City Island by Jeremy and Miramol by me. Um, and I feel like these topics we've been talking about today, games as art, homogenization, and this kind of pervasive sandbox genre, are all informing these two projects that we are working on.
Mhm.
I feel like we are both like now exploring some kind of non-linearity in order to create places to be visited. Like we are creating like settings and environments. Um, and I was wondering why you find yourself drawn to this now, given that your previous games followed a more linear structure. How have you found creating something more open-ended? Have you thought about it in a response to any of the topics we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, maybe you should take over while I talk.
Okay.
I forgot to turn on snapping, but I guess it kind of goes back to like what we were mentioning before, like that because this space is like so strange and new and kind of like messed up in certain ways, that makes it an interesting place to work. And yeah, there's all these homogenous kind of open world games, and they're a bit like boringly problematic or something. So it kind of made me feel like, oh, well, maybe I should work in that space and try to like mimic that open world style, and make something that has that map with the little missions that you follow, and kind of play with those like expectations we normally have from open world games. So I guess that's the biggest reason why I wanted to do that. Also, I was thinking a lot about world building, like building out these spaces, and that just seems like such a good kind of like medium to do that, because you don't have to be so linear about how the player progresses through the space, and they can just go and explore it as they want, and like complete missions as they want, and just trying to like mess around with that as much as I can. And I guess like I'll say too, as people can see in this Unreal project, like it's just a database of stuff, right? And we're just like placing the stuff here to like build out something that kind of looks interesting. And it could be in any configuration, right? It doesn't matter. What's important is we have the database, and then we have the algorithms that access the database, which is sort of like the definition of new media, right? As like Lev Manovich put it in the 90s. And like the video that for Art Fair Philippines was made from all these assets, right? It was just like another configuration of these assets. And like I just think open world games are just such a interesting way to deal with that idea of like a database and then algorithms that access the database, because you can just put it all in a world, one big world, right? You don't have to be so linear about it, right? And it's really allows people to experience it in like whatever way makes sense for them. And then also I like, oh, that's so cool. Oh, that looks great. I like the idea of including even parts of the game that you don't have to play, right? That just like simulate like this, right? So like something you can just like watch for a little while, you know?
That's always kind of been something I've always wanted, is to like to kind of create stuff that kind of becomes more emergent, like things that like kind of take on a life of their own and become responsive, and like and I feel like this is like also like part of why I am drawn to doing something like this now, um is like kind of creating a kind of like an experience you cannot control, is this
Right.
appealing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you like set up the world, and then everyone experiences it in a different way to some extent. But what about you? Like why? Because you're making a similar kind of open world thing. Was there other reasons for it?
Um, I think I think like other reasons. I feel like there's like a lot of things that I am interested in creating, but in terms of like justifying them,
Or not, or
I
just why? Like not to justify, but like why you decided to do that, or
I
what
well like
drew
I guess something like I really wanted to kind of create um like with this project I'm doing Miramol, it's like the way you play it is it's like you are not like a character specifically. You like kind of it's like there's like kind of this world of all these kind of characters who are like, you know, on their own paths and journeys, and like, you know, their stories overlap, and then there's like different ways that they interact with each other, and you basically are like attaching yourself to them and following them around. So it's much more like a voyeuristic experience, but like you and like you don't actually have any kind of agency to change the world, which is also like a promise, like, you know, all these games is that the player is extremely powerful. um and like, you know, is basically like a god. I think
oh no.
you're adding all that stuff while I was
Damn it.
playing.
Oh
but I
yeah.
guess
Oh
but I guess
shit.
but if you add it again it'll be okay.
Okay. Oh yeah.
No, but you should stop it
Oh.
and then
Oh
add
right,
it.
right,
Yeah.
right, right.
um yeah, so what was I saying? Like
Like
yeah, this says like no agency at all. So I get, but I guess like, so I guess the game I'm trying to make is kind of like, it's like a sandbox where like it's like kind of like that, like it feels like the kind of like the relationship is like reversed, or like you're kind of like the way that you like literally explore is between like the relationships between things, and like kind of like going from object to object, and like and how they like are associated with each other. It's kind of hard to like explain, but it's kind of like, it's basically like a network. The game is like basically like a network that you navigate. um and I think that's just like something that like I really um want to see. Like, you know, I guess what I mean is it's like a, I'm curious as to how that will like what happens when that kind of like, how is a game to play that is like this, and like, and then I'm kind of going from there. So it's actually kind of um from this kind of idea of how to navigate space, and then I'm kind of creating a game from that idea. So
that's cool.
so it's kind of almost like I could say I'm still in like kind of like experimental or like artistic research stage. Um,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, and like I think that's all I have to say about that right now.
Yeah, I mean that's cool. And that goes back to like what we were talking about. Um, in terms of like us just being sole creators of this thing that's usually used, you can take over now.
Cool.
Sole creators of this thing that's usually used by big teams of people is like, we can create these worlds that we've wanted to see, you know, like we grew up playing video games. They're like in our like aesthetic DNA or whatever. And we can try to do these weird like experimental things. Yeah. Um, nice.
Yeah,
I don't know, like I guess the one other thing I want to maybe touch on that could be interesting is this idea of like kind of what we're doing right now is like the performative aspect of video games.
yes.
It's something like I don't like. I'm so not a performer, obviously. Like, you know, I roll up to this interview just like wearing a hoodie, and like I've done performances where like I literally just sit in the audience on a chair and just twiddle my thumbs on like with a joystick, you know, and like that's my performance. So like that's kind of funny because I'm so not a performer, and then I'm like performing these video games. Um, but it's weird too. Like I don't know how you feel about it. You know, I guess we're like a decade apart in age, which is like maybe significant in that like when I grew up, I was playing like Nintendo, and when you were growing up, maybe you were playing like a next generation thing or something. I don't know.
Nintendo
But like,
64.
yeah, there you go. So that was like when I was in college. So what was I gonna say? I guess when I was growing up, I never thought of video games as like a performative thing. And now they're like very performative, right? So
Right.
I don't know, like what do you think about it? Or how do you relate to it maybe differently than me?
In what way do you think they're performative?
And that there's like streamers, right? That idea of
Right.
like so like a Twitch streamer, like people are making like millions of dollars by people watching them play video games. Which, you know, when I was a kid, the worst thing was to go to your friend's house and they would just take over the controller and you could never play, right? But now, in fact, like that's what it is. Like it's just a bunch of people taking over the controllers and you just watch them play. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there is like this kind of very I feel like a lot of this kind of comes back to this very uh like I feel like we kind of somewhere forgot that like the games used to be enjoyed like in a much more social setting, and I think that games as performances is kind of like a continuation of sitting on the couch with someone and like watching them play a game, which is actually how like it's kind of like an example of how like to play a game isn't necessarily to literally play a game. Like like a lot of people can experience it with like a single person who is navigating that, and it's like, but you all kind of feel compelled, and it feels live. It still feels like some kind of reactive thing, even though if it's not literally you with that
Mhm.
agency, and like so long as it is literally live.
Yeah.
And I think that's like why games are often very hypnotic to see in some kind of streaming or something like this. And yeah, games as performances is also something I've fallen into as also being like a very kind of like shy, meek
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like like I've done like basically because I've been working with game engines like artistically for like 6 years, and like and like the sorry, it's like very visually overwhelming.
I know. Yeah. We really
uh,
like went for it here.
um like and like the yeah, and like something that's kind of been a constant like thing to like iterate over is like how do we present these projects. And like with Fantasia Malware, we have done games as performances. Like we've designed games that like uh, that aren't even intended to be played by an audience because they are only played by us as instruments, basically. Um, and that's also a good question. Like as we are showing these two sandboxes in July, is like
Yeah.
how do you show work
That's
like this? And like do you have any ideas right now that you want to talk about, or like have you had
that's why I wanted to bring it up.
yeah.
um, no, there's like at this point now, because it's like these game engines have maybe been like a standard thing that artists have been using for, I mean, a long time, but like I feel like they became more popular maybe about 10 years ago, right? And like, so people have been performing them for about 10 years. And it feels like at this point, like all the moves have been done, you know? There's like the
Right.
move where you like play the game and then you have a musician that plays along with you. There's the move where like you play the game, it's like kind of almost like a comedy routine that you can like play over it, you know? Oh, now it's way easier to see. You know, like uh where you kind of like play a game and tell a story while you're playing it. And like I've done all these things and seen them done, and like it's cool. But I'm just wondering like where it can go from here, I guess, is like what other like interesting move could we do um to perform a game space. I have no idea what the answer to that is. It's just something like I've been thinking about. Um like what are some other ways to perform it?
I
Yeah.
think it's also like with these things, it's like because it's something I kind of thought about as well. Is it's like um to me the most interesting thing is like the like and like in my personal interests is like the game itself. Like and so I'm
Mm,
interested in like kind of ways of performing that like that is the forefront. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to kind of having some like you know fucking live band or something. Do you know what I mean? That like kind of where it's like you kind of like make it more novel. I mean, like with Orchid Collector, which is a streaming game we do, it's definitely like very like, it's about like kind of like, being a bit more nuts with the performance.
Mhm.
But I think for this, I'm more thinking about like how can I really kind of like how can the game itself kind of be at the forefront of that live
Mm.
experience?
Okay.
And like I mean that's just like my attitude towards it. I'm also wondering as like another thing, which is I guess is like with this game I'm working on is it has like a lot of text, which like I've heard that you mentioned you don't like. Um, but
I mean, there's
no,
ways to
it's
do
it's
it.
fine. But like I just mean like that's also something I'm thinking about is like how do you do that in an interesting way? Like
Right.
I was thinking of having like readers or like can you know like it's like
Mm.
like a kind of like a live like live reading of the text in the game. So having like live voice acting basically. That was one thing I was thinking about.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think for me it's like I am kind of gonna get further with kind of discovering like actually kind of more like the structure of what this is going to look like, and then I will make those decisions. What's your approach, do you think, to something like this?
I don't know yet. I'm like really thinking about the different options that are out there. Um,
Because like honestly, I'm like I think that like like and you can kind of see this if you go on Twitch. It's like the games that can be compelling in their own right, and like
right. Yeah. I think that's such a good point. Yeah.
yeah,
Just like a playthrough of the game could be really interesting, right?
yeah, like like literally even not like saying a word. Do you know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
it's like
Right. Yeah.
the game is
Like,
on, and actually when we did Utopias, we did this. We did a full playthrough of the game. Like a full playthrough of the game. Like we introduced it at the start, but then it was just the whole thing, and like and we fully thought it was like like we said at the beginning, like like we're just doing this as like kind of like a thing that's happening, and then but you can get a drink, you can talk to your friends, you can like
mm,
go like because there was like kind of this big stage, and then there was like this like gallery place where people could actually play the game themselves. Like we were saying, like you're not a captive audience right now, you can like do whatever you want, but it's like
yeah.
everyone stayed like the full like two
Oh, wow.
hours because like I think they're just like drawn, like knowing that it's like basically like a live window into like this kind of virtual world. I think like there's something very compelling about that.
Right. That's such a good point. I like that too. I do really like games as like ambient kind of background too, where like people have the option to like get up and like go get a drink or like do whatever. Um, it's just this thing that's just like on in the background. I think that's how a lot of people watch streams too, right? Is like
Yeah.
they just turn them on and it's just like, like when you're just in your apartment alone all day or whatever, and you watch a streamer playing a game, it's sort of like you have a friend with you or something,
Yeah.
and like kind of way. But like it's how people experience it a lot of times. So
Yeah, I feel like I'm very old-fashioned in that the way I consume media is like, now I am watching a video and now I am talking to my friends, and but I feel like most people's experience of media now is like they have like a TV that's like playing, like a TV
mm,
show, and they're
right,
playing Elden Ring, and
right,
they're like watching porn. I don't know, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's
yeah.
like this idea of kind of like a kind of a captive or focused audience. But then
Mhm.
maybe that's also something that people are drawn to about going to a space is like kind of that is more intentional.
Yeah. Right. Is that right? Yeah, that's true. Now they don't feel like they can be so distracted. And I think it's funny too, is like we think of that as like a new thing that we just put this media on in the background. But then I go to like visit my mom or whatever, and they just have CNN on all the time. And it's like a very similar kind of vibe for
Yeah.
sure. Like a thing that people just do now. Like we're so overstimulated all the time.
Yeah,
Um,
I
and
find
like
myself, I think the last few years especially, kind of basically being constantly stimulated by media. Like,
yeah. really bad. And I feel like as I like live alone now or whatever, yeah, I do it way more because I'm just alone, and like when I was living with somebody, you'd have to pay attention to that person sometimes. but like but now like being alone all day, you're like, I don't know, I'm way more deeper into it and it's not good. And this could like tie back to the original discussion we were having, like about over designing things and stuff. It's like when you think about that experience, even like of my mom having CNN on 24/7 at home, it's like there's such a myriad of array of like visual stimulants like streaming through our eyes all day. Like you have the aesthetics of like news, you have the aesthetics of like my mom playing like Candy Crush on her iPad, and like her husband like looking at Facebook on his iPad, and then you have like the IKEA shit on the walls, and like it's like the amount of like different styles. Then you have like the fashion, like we put logos on our shirts and stuff, like you have your monster shirt, which is like a very new thing. Like I was just watching like some old documentary, not that old, from like the 70s of New York, and it was just like showing people in New York like a really regular day, and nobody had like logos on their shirts, like there was no animated billboards there, the cabs did not have like ads on them and all this stuff, like not long ago at all. And like there's such a shift in like the visual landscape of our day-to-day lives, that's when you step back and think about it, it's so crazy. And to have a artwork that's just like such a coherent design experience makes no sense, I guess. It's like that's
a
not
really interesting point. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's not like accurate to our experience
anymore. Yeah, I mean, maybe it used to, like watching this documentary from the 70s, like, yeah, being in a big city was much more coherent, but now it's like how it's like when you think about it, it's like insane that we can navigate a city. Like it's so crazy. Like, so I just saw you guys in Berlin. I've been to Berlin when I was like 20. So like 20 years ago, I went to Berlin. I don't know anything about Berlin, but you told me like a neighborhood. I found an Airbnb. I used my phone. I like got around. I like could take an Uber to the airport and like get around just fine. This crazy environment, right? Of like billboards and traffic and like being on my cell phone, and like it's so weird.
Yeah. And it
The
feels like,
language I don't understand. Yeah.
and it feels like all these things are kind of like, it's like kind of like an explosion that is like continuous, like, and like,
Yeah.
like how to like it's like, I'm always at a point where I'm like, how could we go further than this? And it
Yeah.
always somehow happens. And like um
I mean, look, eventually it's going to give, right? It has to. It's going to. Maybe in our lifetime, like something's going to give, and like a bunch of us are going to, I feel like really like most of humanity is going to get like wiped out from global warming.
yeah, I
or
mean,
just,
we literally have 3 global crises
yeah,
crises
right.
happening right now. Do you know what I mean?
Pandemic,
Not one,
war,
one would be like, oh shit, we're fucked. We got 3. Like,
yeah, we got 3. One of them is going to be the death of us, at least most of it. Like I don't know. Yeah, it's so crazy when you step back and think about it. And I mean, that's why it feels good to make art, because we do have like the privilege to think about this shit like daily, for whatever it's worth. I don't know, but it feels good to, at least.
yeah, I also like, yeah, it is an odd time to make art. Sometimes I feel very inspired, and other times I feel very overwhelmed. Like,
Right.
uh, yeah, how have the last few years like affected you, like with everything?
I mean,
Like,
I feel like I've always made art about being a confused person, but now it's just more so, I feel like it's a really interesting moment, certainly for art. I think during the pandemic, there's been some like massive cultural shifts in I guess who gets to like be heard now, which is like really good. There's like a lot of cultural shifts too, and like maybe I'm thinking, and like what we were talking about before, and like the overproduction of art and the slickness of it. I think people are going to be a little more hesitant to like invest in overproduction, because like why, you know, like there's so many crises in the world. Do we really want to like sit around spending like millions of dollars trying to get this like perfect shiny thing, right, when you can just have this like what we're doing now, this crazy environment? Like I don't know, you know what I mean? I'm not like articulating it very well, but
Did
there's
you
definitely going to be like, yeah.
do you mean like in like a at like an industry level, or like just like an
I think both. I think industry level and art, like just going to art shows level, you know.
right?
Um,
I mean, there
like
is kind of,
hopefully,
sorry.
yeah. No, go on.
I was just gonna say, like, you know, like I'm such like a kind of like uh I like overthink everything, and there's kind of like an immediacy to what we're doing that even though it's like so crazy, it's like kind of very relaxing and enjoyable.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like there's an immediacy, because it feels like if I don't do this, I'll literally go crazy. Right? Is that what you mean? Or I don't know.
I meant literally what we're doing right now, like this scene.
Oh,
But
oh yeah, yeah.
but yeah, if I didn't do this, and I was just on this call, I would also probably just go crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this going back to performance, like this is a fun way to do a performance for sure. Is you just
Yeah.
have the database and you just start throwing stuff down together. This is pretty fun.
Yeah, like especially imagine if like kind of these things were more like reactive. Like I think that could be
Yeah,
like, you know, like more of like an ecosystem. Like that'd be super
right,
interesting.
right, right. Which we could do, but like you have to like we'd have to plan it a little more. But
Yeah.
we could definitely.
But even just this is nice, I think.
This is like really cool. Yeah, it just looks cool. But also as a game, I would want to explore this weird world.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. You know, it has that kind of like visual incoherence that you were saying
Yeah,
was
that we've been
more
talking about.
authentic to our
Yeah,
experience.
right, right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, right. It's so incoherent, but yet just because it's a 3D space, you look at it and you can imagine like walking around it and like navigating it.
Yeah. I mean, how different does this look to going outside?
Right,
Like really?
right.
Do you
Not
know what
that
I
different.
mean? Like,
It's more simple, really. It's like
yeah.
simpler than stepping outside, really. We don't even have any trees in here. Trees are like super complex. And no vehicles. Yeah, you know, I don't know. Yeah, it's
Great.
weird times. But I think is that good?
I
We've
think that's
talked.
good. I think that's good. Well, I guess let's just wrap this up now. So,
Yeah, yeah,
I guess like that was a cool conversation.
yeah.
That's all actually.
Great talking to you, as always. Yeah, yeah. This was a lot of fun. Super good idea to just kind of like build this weird world together
Yeah.
while we talk.
Yeah, I
That
thought
was
it
really
was, you know, you could get like ideas from what you're talking about. It was like kind of fun.
yeah.
Anyway, ciao.
Cool. Thank you, Jira.
Thank you so much for that, Jeremy and Jira. I love how in the beginning, Jeremy said, art just makes video games even more weird. Okay, and with that, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. We noticed there are a few questions. As this is a recorded talk, what we will do, unfortunately, it's an anonymous attendee who sent the questions. We have taken note of all your questions. We are going to be forwarding them to Daata and to Jeremy. And if they agree, we will be posting the replies on our Twitter feed sometime this weekend. So thanks a lot for that. So just to wrap up, just again to acknowledge the education partners of ArtFairPH Talks, the Ateneo Art Gallery, the Museum Foundation of the Philippines, and the Embassy of Spain in the Philippines. To thank again our co-presenter for our ArtFairPH Film Globe Platinum, and a big shout out to everybody there enjoying their Bombay Sapphires at the Globe Platinum Lounge in the amphitheater of Ayala Triangle Gardens. Hello to everyone and thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our major sponsor, LG, whose TV screens allow us to enjoy Jeremy Couillard's wonderful work, and our exhibition partner, Daata. Our next talk for today is a very interesting talk with Paco Barragan, who is a writer and curator and also a lecturer at Sotheby's Institute. He will talk about the untold story of 2,678 years of collecting. So we hope to see you at 7:00 p.m. tonight. If you haven't yet, there's still enough time to register. Thanks again, everybody, and see you.